I want to sell this watch.
Where did you get this?
It belongs to my mother.
You don't have to sell this today.
I do.
What if I help your mother first and we figure out the watch later?
He was holding his own watch when the little girl walked in trying to sell it. That sentence took 9 years to make sense. This is how it happened. 7 years before Zoe walked into that antique shop with her mother's most precious secret wrapped in a dish towel, Caleb Osei still believed love was something a man could choose out loud. He was 30 then. Son of Richard Osei Sr., founder of Osei Capital Group, real estate, logistics, private equity, and the kind of generational wealth that does not advertise itself because entire rooms already know. Caleb wore the right clothes without thinking about them. He said the right things at the right dinners without feeling anything. The future built for him was spotless and suffocating in equal measure. Then he met Jade. She was not beautiful in the way rich men's women were supposed to be beautiful. That was the first thing that stopped him. He saw her at a hospital charity event his aunt's foundation had organized. Caleb had come because his father believed being seen mattered even when caring was optional. Jade worked in the hospital's patient records department and had stayed late helping nurses prep intake files before the crowd arrived. She wore a simple dark blouse, natural hair pulled back, small gold studs. She moved like someone who had mastered the skill of being exactly present without being performative. She did not look at his last name. She looked at him once, answered his question about the side entrance, and went back to work. He stood there longer than necessary, annoyed and inexplicably intrigued. "You work here?" he asked. "Yes. Aren't you coming to the event?" She glanced at the stack of folders threatening to avalanche off the counter. "I'm still working. At this hour? Patients don't wait for galas." She said it without attitude, just fact. That sentence stayed with him. He came back 3 days later with paperwork no one needed him to deliver. Then again the week after. Then once more with no excuse at all. "I wanted to see you," he finally said. Jade should have ended it there. She knew the architecture of this story. Wealthy man, curious for a season, gone by winter. She had seen it performed by other women she respected and watched those same women try to reassemble themselves afterward. She knew all of it before he did. But Caleb was not careless with her. That was his particular danger. He listened. He remembered. He arrived when he said he would. He learned which corner store she stopped at after night shifts. He knew her younger brother's college application mattered. He paid attention without turning attention into control. When he asked her out properly, he did not send a car. He stood outside the hospital at 9 p.m. holding 2 cold brew coffees from the cart nearby. "I know why you should say no," he told her. "Then why are you asking?" "Because I'd rather know the ending than wonder about it forever." She took the coffee. "This doesn't mean I trust you. Fair. Or your family. Also fair. Or where this is headed." He nodded. "Neither do I. I just know I want to go there with you." It was not smooth. It was better than smooth. It was true enough to make her nervous. Their relationship grew in ordinary places. Diner booths, traffic with the windows down, weekend farmers markets where no one cared if a man from the Forbes list spent 2 hours arguing the merits of handmade hot sauce. He told her things he had never said in his father's house, that the company felt like a machine wearing his face, that every future already had his name on it before he arrived, that approval in his family always arrived wrapped in expectation. With Jade, he became less polished and more present. With Caleb, Jade became less defended and more vulnerable in ways that scared her. She let him meet her mother in Southwest Atlanta. Small house, tight yard, good food. Her mother watched him cut his chicken and said later, "A man raised with money can still love honestly. The question is what happens when the money starts screaming louder than the love." Jade laughed. Her mother did not. By year 2, Caleb had decided in his chest he would marry her. He had not yet survived telling his father. Richard Osei Sr. was 61, square-shouldered, composed, and dangerous in the way certain men are dangerous. Not through violence but through infrastructure. He believed in hierarchy the way other men believe in God. He did not think of himself as cruel. Cruel men who know they are cruel can sometimes feel shame. Richard thought of himself as protecting continuity. That language covered more damage than cruelty ever could. He heard about Jade the way men like him always hear about threats, through second-hand intelligence delivered as concern. Drivers notice. Assistants observe. Cousins translate loyalty into information. By the time he called Caleb into the study, he already knew enough to be dangerous. "A hospital records clerk," he said, standing by the window as if the city itself were on his side. "You're throwing away everything we built for a woman with no standing?" Caleb was 32. Under his father's gaze, old habits of deference still pulled at him. He fought them. "Her name is Jade. That is not the issue. It is to me." His father smiled the way men smile when emotion is mistaken for leverage. "You're free to have whatever private attachment you want. You are not free to make it the Osei legacy. This isn't about the company. I love her. That," his father said quietly, "is exactly why you are not ready to run anything." What followed was not a dramatic argument. No raised voices. No shattered glass. Worse, stillness. Strategic withdrawal. Kojo, Richard, understood something Caleb learned too slowly. Love survives opposition. It struggles against quiet systems deployed methodically against it. The first moves were dressed as logistics. Caleb's schedule rerouted. Jade's department supervisor received a call about professional boundary concerns from someone on the hospital board. Her landlord suddenly had a nephew needing the apartment. None of it traceable. All of it deliberate. Then Jade told him she was pregnant. She stood in the center of his private apartment, the one he rented under an LLC when he needed to exist somewhere without the Osei name attached. And she told him. Hands clasped below her stomach. Eyes braced for his reaction. He crossed the room and held her so hard she had to laugh through the tears. "Did you hear me?" she whispered against his chest. "I heard you. You're not scared." "I'm terrified." He pulled back enough to see her face. His whole expression had shifted. "Jade, I'm so happy it scares me." That made her cry for real. He knelt with his forehead pressed gently against her stomach, barely showing yet, and made a promise he did not fully know how to keep. "I won't let them erase you. I won't let them erase this baby. I swear." He gave her the watch that same night. It had no famous ancestor attached to it. He had found it in a London vintage shop years earlier because it felt like it belonged to a life he had not yet chosen. Silver, heavy, scratched near the hinge. He had engraved the inside himself. "For our time. See, nobody carries pocket watches anymore," Jade said softly, holding it in her palm. "A man who wants to mark the exact second his life became his own does." She smiled through tears. "That's too much. It's not enough." He closed her fingers around it. "Whatever happens, this time is ours." She repeated those words later in the dark after he fell asleep. Like practice, like armor. For several weeks they lived inside something tender and dangerous. Names for the baby. Secret prenatal visits. Small plans. Jade bought a pair of knitted socks from a street vendor and hid them in her tote because taking them out and looking at them too long made the future feel real enough to hurt. Then Richard moved. He did not confront Jade directly. Men who operate through systems do not soil themselves with direct confrontations when machinery is available. Instead, Jade received a call that her grandmother in Savannah had taken a bad fall and was asking for her urgently. The message was vague. The timing was wrong. But family obligation is not a switch, especially in women raised the way Jade was raised. Caleb was out of town on company travel. He could not escape without creating questions he was not yet ready to answer. He told her to wait one day. She said it was probably nothing. She said she would go down and come back by evening. That was the last conversation before the lie. The car never reached Savannah. What Caleb was told. There had been an accident on I-16. What actually happened was quieter and uglier. The hired car carrying Jade was intercepted past Macon by men who spoke politely and explained there was a road issue ahead, that they had been sent to reroute her safely. She argued. She asked who sent them. One of them told her, almost apologetically, that some families do not negotiate when legacy is threatened. She tried to open the door while the car was still rolling. That was the accident. The vehicle swerved off the shoulder and rolled into a drainage ditch thick with brush. The driver died. Jade did not. But by the time other drivers stopped and emergency services arrived, she had sustained a head injury severe enough to shatter memory into fragments. She could not say her name. She could not say who to call. She could not connect the silver watch found beside her to any face or voice she could name. Richard's people moved faster than the ambulance report. A funeral was arranged around a different casualty from the same stretch of highway. An identification made through suggestion and managed paperwork. A coffin kept closed for mercy, he was told. A grief delivered so efficiently through family structure and urgency that even an intelligent man can swallow it whole. Caleb buried Jade without seeing her face. He also buried the child he believed had died with her. The months after hollowed him. He worked. He traveled. He responded to emails. He sat in board meetings and said the right things in a voice that sounded like his. People said grief sometimes matures a man. What they meant was that sorrow had made him easier to direct. He never married. He came close twice because proximity to suitable women had been engineered long enough that refusing became conspicuous. Both times, something in him stopped before ceremony. His father called it unresolved sentiment. Caleb called it an unfinished grave. Jade woke in a county hospital in Middle Georgia with no context for her own life. She knew pain first, then voices, then a nurse saying the baby is strong before the light went flat again. She could speak. She could answer questions about the present. What she could not do was access the past. Her name, her family, the silver watch wrapped in gauze beside the bed that made her cry without understanding why. All of it was separated from her by a wall made of broken glass and fog. A hospital intake listed her as Jane Doe until an older woman named Miss Birdie, who ran a second-hand clothing booth outside the county hospital and had seen too many people fall through the cracks to allow another one, recognized that the young pregnant woman had no one coming. She took Jade home to her house in Warner Robins after discharge. Not out of sentiment. Out of the stubborn moral instinct of someone who refuses to let the accidentally disposable stay that way. Jade gave birth to a daughter 6 weeks later during a heavy rainstorm. The baby screamed so fiercely that the attending nurse laughed and said, "This child came back from somewhere angry." Jade named her Zoe. The name arrived from nowhere and made her chest ache in a way that felt like memory knocking from the wrong side of a locked door. The watch stayed with her always. She did not know who had given it to her. She only knew that every time Miss Birdie gently suggested selling it during hard months, a panic rose through her so completely that even practical Miss Birdie stopped asking. She kept it wrapped in cloth at the bottom of a storage bin alongside Zoe's birth records, clinic cards, and the fragments of a life slowly built around not knowing. Years moved the way hardship moves when no miracle interrupts it. Jade worked what she could find, sorting inventory at a distribution warehouse, cleaning offices on a second-shift schedule, doing alterations badly at first, then well. She was patient with her coworkers, careful with Zoe, and prone to episodes of blankness when a word or smell or city name made something flicker behind her eyes and disappear before she could hold it. Sometimes she dreamed a man's voice saying this time is ours. She woke crying with no explanation she could name. Zoe grew into the kind of child that poverty makes sharp. By 7, she understood how money changes adult behavior. She knew which days her mother's smile was on loan. She knew which medicines were being rationed because groceries had to come first. She knew the silver watch in the bin mattered more than anything else they owned, though she did not know why. Miss Birdie passed away that year. They kept the room and the neighborhood's goodwill and nothing like safety. Her mother's headaches worsened. The fainting spells increased. The clinic doctor said more tests were necessary. Possibly old injury scarring. Possibly something vascular. The kind of maybe that becomes expensive before it becomes clear. Zoe sat on the waiting bench outside and counted the prescriptions they could not afford to fill. The day she found the watch, her mother was asleep and breathing unevenly after a dizzy spell. Zoe opened the bin looking for the small emergency envelope where a few folded bills were sometimes kept. Instead, her fingers found the silver watch. She turned it over, pressed the latch, watched it open. For our time. See, she could not read it fully, but she recognized value. Value has a particular shine. Children raised in shortage learn that faster than any school teaches it. That was how she ended up in Atlanta. Not through fate arranged neatly, through one practical, desperate, child-sized decision after another. She rode with a neighbor heading north before dawn, told no one except the woman at the next unit who assumed she was visiting a relative, and arrived in a city larger than fear with the watch wrapped in a dish towel under her dress. She found the antique shop by chance. Or what looks like chance before stories explain themselves. Caleb had a partial ownership stake in the shop through a heritage retail acquisition one of his companies had absorbed. He did not usually sit there, but that afternoon, a canceled meeting, a restless mind, his father's voice still inhabiting the walls of his office building. He came here instead of going back upstairs. He was 39. Grief had refined him into someone others found steady and women often called kind in the careful tone reserved for men carrying old injuries. He wore success well because he had been trained to, but there were shadows under his eyes and a silence in the pauses between his sentences that people found either romantic or worrying depending on whether they loved him enough to notice the difference. When Zoe stepped through the door, he was reviewing an invoice at the back counter with the store manager. Neither of them looked up immediately. Children drifted in sometimes with family heirlooms dressed up as treasures, old coins, broken electronics, objects repurposed by necessity. The manager began his standard gentle redirect. "I want to sell something," Zoe said. Caleb looked up only because there was no childishness in her voice. She stood in the doorway, small dress faded at the collar, sneakers worn through at one toe, hair in uneven puffs, trying to look older than she was. Her eyes were the kind that made adults uncomfortable if they were not paying careful attention. Too direct, too tired for her age. She unfolded the dish towel. The watch landed on the glass counter. Caleb went completely still. Not gradually, entirely. The room changed around him without sound. He knew it before he touched it. The scratch near the hinge. The specific weight. The absolute impossibility of this object lying on a shop counter under fluorescent lighting in front of a hungry-looking little girl who could not be more than 7 years old. His hand reached before his thoughts could. When he opened it and saw the engraving, something old and long buried tore through him so fast he almost dropped the watch. "For our time. See." He sat down without planning to. The manager said something. Came from very far away. He looked at the girl. "Where did you get this?" She stepped back. Children read adult intensity faster than adults believe. "It's my mother's." "What is your mother's name?" She hesitated. "Good. Cautious children survive longer." "Jade." The shop disappeared. Not physically. Completely. All 9 years between one sentence and the next folded inward until Caleb felt like a man standing at the edge of his own existence, watching it fracture. He did not ask more questions immediately. The girl was frightened, and shock, when it is real, teaches restraint faster than any social training. "You don't have to sell this today," he said carefully. "I do," Zoe replied. The firmness in those 2 words hit him somewhere specific. "What if I help your mother first and we figure out the watch later?" Children raised on shortage do not trust offers. Zoe looked at him, then the manager, then the door, calculating the geometry of escape with a precision that would have undone him even if he had not already begun to understand the truth. "Why?" He chose the truest answer he could offer without shattering her. "Because someone gave me that watch to hold for safekeeping. And I'd like to earn the right to explain that." Zoe studied him for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and held out a folded clinic card. He looked at the address and the diagnosis notes. He was already moving. He drove himself to Warner Robins. No assistant. No call ahead. No preparation for what he was about to see. The room Jade rented sat behind a laundromat and a tire shop, in a low brick complex where shared hardship had been converted into reluctant community by necessity. Zoe led him through the door. He had to stop in the frame and grip the wood for 1 full second because grief, when it is resurrected without warning, can mimic a physical blow. Jade lay on a low bed near the window, thinner than memory, older in the face than 9 years should have made her. Hair pulled back loosely from sleep, one hand resting on her forehead, the other open beside her, empty, alive. The word felt too small for what it carried. She opened her eyes at the sound of his footstep and looked at him with ordinary caution. A sick woman, a stranger, a man in her room with her child behind him. "Zoe," she said, voice rough. "I brought someone," Zoe said carefully. "He says he can help." Jade pushed upright too fast and winced. "Who are you?" Caleb had imagined this moment, without knowing he was imagining it, across 9 years of grief. No version of it had included surviving it. "My name is Caleb." The name moved across her face like weather. Something disturbed the surface, then passed. "I don't know you." "No," he said softly. "You don't." That was the beginning of everything after. He moved them to Atlanta within 48 hours. Not to the Osei estate. He placed them instead in a quiet furnished residence connected to a company trust. A live-in nurse, a neurologist appointment, groceries stocked without discussion of cost. He told the staff they were under his personal protection. That phrase carried enough gravity in his world to suspend questions for a while. Jade accepted help with suspicion. Memory loss had not taken her instincts. She let the doctors run tests. She allowed Zoe to sleep without anxiety for the first time in months. But when Caleb visited, she watched him the way a person listens for something moving underneath a conversation. On the third day, she said, "You look at me like I owe you something." He leaned back in the chair. "Not owe. Remember." Her face shifted. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Say things that make my head feel full." He closed his eyes briefly. "I'm sorry." The apology mattered. She had known men with resources who only apologized when it cost them nothing. The doctors confirmed what the county clinic had feared. Traumatic brain injury. Old scarring. Episodic dissociation worsened by years of untreated stress and inadequate follow-up care. Her memory loss had never been total blankness. More like a house where every door was broken off its frame. Language remained. Emotional instinct remained. Autobiographical continuity had shattered at impact and been left to scar over in hardship rather than treated while it could still be repaired. "Can it come back?" Caleb asked. The neurologist answered carefully. "Parts are already returning, whether she recognizes them or not." Emotionally charged triggers, objects, phrases, locations, can unlock access. Stress either blocks it or forces it. Full integration is possible. Not guaranteed. Object. He looked at the watch sitting on the desk and did not rush. He paid bills quietly. He let Zoe set the pace of trust. He brought food he remembered Jade loving 9 years ago and said nothing when she ate it without a flicker of recognition. He answered Zoe's questions honestly when he could and gently when he could not. On the 5th evening, Zoe asked him, while he was tying her sneaker, "Why do you look sad when my mom is sleeping?" He paused. "Because I'm trying to remember something important." Zoe considered that. "Maybe you should sleep more too." He laughed unexpectedly. She looked pleased. That laugh arrived without his permission and it startled him. He had not heard his own joy move that freely in years. He began pulling records behind the scenes. The accident report, the Georgia State Patrol log, the funeral paperwork, the hospital transfer chain, the timeline of calls made from his father's office the week Jade allegedly died. He used resources the way powerful men use them when something other than profit finally matters. Quiet investigators. A retired driver who remembered too much for the severance he had accepted. A former personal assistant whose loyalty had thinned alongside his retirement savings. The picture emerged. Hideous and precise. His father had not just lied. He had engineered the intercepted car, the substituted casualty, the accelerated funeral, the suppression of survivor intake records under a different county filing, the quiet payments, the assumption that grief would complete what force began. The confrontation happened in the same study where every war in that house had ever started. Same shelves, same afternoon light across the same hardwood floor. Caleb placed the copied police reports and witness statements on the desk between them. His father read the top page. Exhaled. Not guilt. Irritation. She would have derailed everything. You derailed it. I protected what mattered beyond your temporary feelings. She was carrying my child. His father's eyes sharpened but did not soften. Then I protected more than one future from an error in judgment. That sentence made restraint feel like the hardest physical act of Caleb's life. His knuckles whitened against the desk edge. Do you hear what you're saying? Perfectly clearly. Do you? Richard leaned back. You were not some entry-level associate following instinct into chaos. You were the continuation of something larger than any one relationship. I removed a complication before it became permanent. She was a person. She is a person. She was a woman you loved at the wrong moment in the wrong position. My daughter is 9 years old. Yes, his father replied without temperature, and still alive. You should consider the restraint that represents. Caleb looked at the man who had raised him and understood two things simultaneously. His father loved him in his own way, and that way was monstrous. He left without another word because staying would have required an action he could not reverse. The storm came on a Tuesday evening. Real weather. A heavy late-fall rain that arrived in the afternoon and deepened toward dark until the city looked simultaneously washed clean and scraped raw. Zoe had been restless all day, cooped inside, drawing families and watches and rain on the back of grocery bags. The adults around her moved like people waiting for something they did not want to name. Jade had been better that morning. By evening she was worse. The neurologist had warned about this memory agitation around integration, the brain cycling through approach and retreat before the door finally opened. Zoe was carrying the watch around the apartment, clicking it open and shut. They kept asking her to put it down. She kept forgetting. When Jade finally asked sharply for the noise to stop, Zoe, overstimulated, overtired, already trembling with thunder outside, grabbed the watch and bolted into the hallway before anyone could stop her. They thought she went to the common area. The nurse checked. Caleb checked. The building guard checked. The rain intensified. She was nowhere inside. Jade's face went white in a way that had nothing to do with memory loss and everything to do with being a mother. Zoe! Caleb was already through the exterior door. The search lasted 11 minutes. It felt like the distance between one life and the next. They found her under the covered entrance of a small church 2 blocks down, crouched beside a woman selling roasted peanuts who had pulled the crying child out of traffic when she saw her running in the rain. Zoe was soaked, shaking, but safe. The watch was clutched in both hands against her chest. When Jade reached her, she dropped to her knees on the wet pavement and pulled her daughter so hard against her that Zoe made a sound of protest before dissolving into tears. "Don't leave me," Jade kept saying. "Don't leave me. Don't you leave me." Caleb reached them seconds later, lungs burning, heart still swinging from the possibility he had almost lost his daughter the same way he had lost everything else, through one small gap in time, undefended. He knelt beside them under the church overhang while rain beat the metal roof like something trying to get back in. Jade's hands moved over Zoe's face and shoulders, proving safety by touch. The watch slipped from Zoe's fingers and fell onto the wet concrete, snapping open. Caleb picked it up. The wind moved the church door rope. Rain blurred the streetlight. Jade looked at the open silver face, at the engraving, "For our time. See." And Caleb, not planning it, not calculating, not doing anything except existing in that moment, said the exact words he had spoken the night he placed it in her hands 9 years before. "No matter what happens, this time is ours." The world detonated inside her. Jade went still in a way that frightened him more than crying would have. Then everything returned at once. His apartment, his face kneeling before her, the confession, the watch in her palm, the car, the men, one of them saying something about families and inconvenience, the vehicle spinning, the hospital ceiling, the child at her chest. 9 years of grief arriving without a name. Dreams that had no faces. The shape of his voice sang promise like it was a sacred word. Her body folded forward before sound came. He caught her. "Jade." She looked at him, not vaguely, not like a stranger testing a name. She looked at him with the full weight of 9 years landing in a single second. "Caleb." Then, quieter, breaking open completely. You buried me. He was crying before he answered. So was she. Zoe pressed herself between them because children close the distance adults collapse into when grief finally becomes honest. Recovery after memory returns is not the same thing as healing. Jade did not wake the following morning into romance. She woke with a migraine so severe she could not keep water down, and then cried for an hour while trying to braid Zoe's hair because memory had returned not as clean sequence but as flood. She knew him. She knew the pregnancy. She knew the shape of what his father had done. She also knew every version of herself forced to survive without the context of her own love story. 3 nights after the storm, Lily, Zoe, asleep, the city quiet after the rain, Jade sat by the window holding the watch. I remember one of them telling me I should have taken money and disappeared gracefully, she said. Caleb stood against the opposite wall because sitting felt too soft for this. I'm sorry. She looked up sharply. Stop apologizing for whether you did not make. My father made it. Yes, but if I let your apology stand in for what he did, I'm charging the wrong account. He nodded once. Then what do you need from me? She looked at the watch. Don't come near me like memory means I'm standing exactly where you left me. I am not that woman. I am every woman that came after. He respected it. So the reunion became something more honest than the usual story permits. He did not reclaim her. He re-met her. He learned the woman who had built a life without context. The mother constructed under pressure. The one who measured resources differently, slept lightly, distrusted ease, and no longer accepted beautiful promises at night value. When Zoe asked directly, 2 weeks after the storm, "Are you my dad?" Neither of them escaped through adulthood's usual evasions. Caleb knelt. Yes. Zoe studied him. Then where were you? He did not say he was lied to. He did not say he was grieving. He did not say he did not know. He said the hardest honest thing. I was not where I should have been. She studied him further. Are you here now? He nearly broke. Yes. Okay, she said. Then don't go again. He didn't. The public collapse of Richard Osei Sr. came first through reputation, then through board displacement, then through the particular silence of men who stop returning calls. Shareholders dislike scandal. Church communities dislike false burials more than most sins because one embarrasses morality while the other embarrasses prestige. Criminal exposure proved legally complex. Paper trails had been deliberately thinned. Intermediaries were dead or bought. But civil liability, public disgrace, and the specific loneliness of watching your name become a cautionary story cut through armor that prison might not have reached. Richard stepped down from the chairmanship. He was not invited to the foundation gala. Old associates responded to messages with increasing delay. Caleb visited him once more. Not to reconcile, to state terms. Jade decides if she ever sees you. Zoe will know the shape of what you did, not every detail, but the shape. You do not come near them without invitation. His father stared at him with something close to bewilderment. I made you. No, Caleb said. You managed me. She made me. He did not need to say Jade's name. The room understood. The real ending was quieter than any of that. It came months later at Zoe's school spring program. Plastic chairs. A microphone that kept cutting out. Children in pressed uniforms. Parents fanning themselves with programs under a tent. Jade wore a blue dress. Caleb sat beside her. Not in front, not slightly apart. Exactly where family should have looked all along. Zoe was reciting a short poem. Halfway through, she lost her place and her eyes swept the audience in a panic. She found them, both of them, together. And because children are not interested in subtle symbolism when actual joy is available, she smiled so completely that the teacher beside her later told someone the whole tent seemed to lift. Jade took Caleb's hand. Not hidden, not performed. Simply because it had returned to where it belonged. He looked at her. She looked back and said softly, "This time is ours." Later, on the balcony of the apartment they had chosen together, after Zoe finally slept, Caleb placed the watch in Jade's open hand. "This was never mine after the night I gave it to you," he said. I was just holding the pieces. She opened it, smiled through tears at the engraving. For our time, she whispered. And everything after, he answered. She looked at him then with full knowledge of everything in between. Love, theft, a road in the dark. 9 years of surviving without a name.